My name is Jonah Jonathan, and welcome once again to the Jazz Musician's Voice. Today I have the wonderful opportunity to present an interview I did with a great friend of mine, Jeremy Shaskus. I'm actually visiting here in Seattle. We're in Shoreline, and Jeremy talks about his early beginnings in music here in Seattle. He was a fellow student of mine at Paterson University, and he's now a resident of Seattle once again, and he plays with quite many musicians. He's really up and coming saxophonist on the scene. You know, we're gonna have some other interviews with some guys that he's worked with, talking Gary Hammond and Nathan Breedlove, and he's also working with some bands like Breaks and Swells. Talented musician and great composer. So please watch this video and stay tuned for other videos in the Pacific Northwest on my trip. We're really excited to present for you some great stuff. So definitely check out Jeremy Shaskus, and there will be some playing at the end of this video. So thanks for watching. Please stay tuned for future videos and future interviews. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, today I'm here with a great friend of mine, Jeremy Shaskus, great saxophonist on the Seattle scene. And I first met Jeremy as a fellow classmate at Paterson University. We were in the same class and hung out a lot. And now I'm here in Seattle visiting Jeremy. And we're at his spot up in Shoreline. And so Jeremy, can you tell us a little bit about your early beginnings in music and how you got connected with saxophone and the music programs in Seattle?
Well, I would like to say the first thing is that I was born originally in Portland, and I moved up to Seattle when I was in 5th grade. My parents, my mom and my dad, they had always played music, but then they switched and decided to be scientists. My mom grew up in LA, and she hated the competition that was surrounded with music and the commercialism, especially Hollywood. And my dad, who grew up in Connecticut, he went to, I think he got deep into jazz and music and had a great appreciation for everything. And he played saxophone. But then I think when he was about 22 or 23, sometime in his 20s, he realized how much dedication it takes to be competent. So music was always around in the house. I'd hear stories about my dad playing saxophone, and which kind of triggered me wanting to play jazz. So when I was 4, my mom taught me piano, because that whole old school, like 1960s, 70s mentality kind of stayed with families even during part of the 90s. So I didn't take music that seriously when I first started out, like most people. And I don't know why, but I wanted to play the trumpet. And however, the public school system in Portland wouldn't allow you to play any instrument except for a recorder until about 4th grade. When I moved up to Seattle in 5th grade, they had band in 4th and 5th grade, and it goes all the way through high school. My band teacher wouldn't let me play trumpet. She said I had the perfect fingers for clarinet. Which is, it's a fun instrument. And I guess I was having some trouble. I had a good amount of trouble in school all the way up until, there were good spots and bad spots, so music was a little bit of an escape for me. I hated my 5th grade teacher, and she hated me. So that 30 minutes twice a week for band class was something to look forward to when going to school. Anyways, so I was playing clarinet in band. I practiced. I was starting to get interested in it. I really have to thank my parents, because my mom exposed me to a little bit of music, but every time I'd go and see my dad, he had this huge record collection of stuff. And he would play me. I remember he got me a Benny Goodman CD when I was like about 10. He got me a Klezmatic CD just to kind of get me interested in the sound. Again, I was 9 or 10, so it took me a minute to appreciate it. Anyways, and then in 6th grade, I switched over to the baritone saxophone because I really wanted to get into their jazz band. I think I dabbled with the French horn a little bit because I wanted to be a trumpet player, but sometimes you just go with the flow. I remember, and when I started out playing with the saxophone, there was a similar fingering system between the clarinet and the saxophone, but I remember just taking extra time to go into a practice room with a fingering chart and working on each note. And then what really kind of like pushed home a big drive for jazz was hearing my alma mater's jazz band when I was like in 7th or 8th grade.
So what school was that you went to?
For middle school, I went to Eckstein Middle School, and then high school I went to Roosevelt. In hindsight, I kind of wish I went to Garfield because there was just something a little bit more that seemed a little bit more organic, especially about their soloists. Like there were some kids that could play at Roosevelt, but the focus was more on just having like a really, really tight ensemble. Whereas Garfield, it was like a blowing band. I remember it being like a blowing band where the ensemble work and the tunes would be like used as vehicles, and then you'd have these fucking ridiculous like soloists, like child prodigies or borderline child prodigies, just tearing stuff up.
So you got to school and you were playing the bari saxophone. When did you feel like you really got serious to a point where you were gonna apply and go to music schools? And were you playing on the jazz scene in Seattle at that time?
It was 16 when I decided to get really, really serious. I am a very shy person, so it was hard for me to go out and meet people. I had the weird thing about being at Roosevelt was that being in the jazz band felt like a full-time occupation. It felt like you were on kind of like this varsity football team, and it was like you had a job, even though it was a class. I had a couple gigs here and there with some local big bands, like that would play community swing dances, like on the north side of town. I was also trying to figure out I was also really insecure, and I felt like I just had to practice and work out a ton of stuff. Yeah.
So then you came to William Paterson. I know you came in the intention of studying with Gary Smellin, and he ended up leaving the program at that time. But talk about the guys you did study with at William Paterson. I know you were working with Rich Perry and Vincent Herring, and
yeah, I always when I tell people about my story, I joke about, I make that joke all the time, saying I went there to study with Gary Smellin, but I ended up studying with Vincent, and it was great. Looking in hindsight, it was great. I think I was always a year ahead in school, like academically, and I should probably back up and say the whole reason I went there to study with Gary, but then the level of students and just the level of musicianship and the seriousness that's out on the East Coast, whether in the New Jersey or New York area or even in part of the Hartford area, is just a completely different level than what I was used to. And yeah, no, studying with Vincent Herring when I was 17, I got a lot of vocabulary. I'm still working on the stuff that he showed me. There was a brief stint where I got to learn tunes with Harold Mayburn. And again, everything looking in hindsight, there's still things that I learned from these guys that I'm working on or I've just kind of gotten a grasp on. Rich Perry was a trip. I guess if I had to go and and say one specific thing of what I learned about from each of the people that I studied privately with William Paterson. I learned about kind of like the working concept and the importance of having a foundation, like understanding a 2-5-1 harmonic movements, and just having why it's important to have stock licks, which was something that I was rebelling against when I first started playing. And then with Harold, it was the importance of playing time and how to listen to a piano player. Rich Perry was how to think conceptually, how to work out like on your own voice and your own conception. And then if you go to William Paterson, you guys will everybody will learn from this guy who was a student there, but his name's Oscar Williams. He taught me how to listen deeply, and how to interact with people. And hanging out with Oscar was like, if you talk to anybody from William that went to William Paterson, or that was around hanging out with people at William Paterson from say like 2007, 2008 to like I think like to like this last year.
Yeah,
they will talk to Oscar. Like I know he was a good friend of mine. He's a good friend of Jonah's, and I remember we'd drive into New York and it'd be listening to Love Supreme, singing along, and then the next moment we'd put on MF Doom or Notorious B.I.G., and then we'd talk about and then we'd talk about Dexter Gordon.
So I know William Paterson. A lot of the value was not only the guys who were teaching there, but the hang and Mulgrew would get us into a lot of shows, and there's a few like jazz frat houses around there. You had the Brown House and the Alps House, which I know you lived at, and then you were in New Jersey at another jazz spot. So there was a lot of playing, and I know at that time you met some guys at William Paterson. You ended up playing with like was it Chico, right? Chico Mendoza.
Yeah, a lot of people like were sleeping on like how much of a badass Chico was. I've got a gig in Portland this week where I'm playing. It's a salsa gig, and it's like I haven't played like serious Latin music, and in a hot minute, like since I was playing with Chico and since it's ensemble, and all the old lessons that he was telling me. Like when I was playing his ensemble, and then when I was playing gigs with him, where we're just like kind of coming back. Chico was great. He's still a part of the tradition. He's a big part of the tradition in terms of if he likes the way you play, or if he sees something special in you, he'll hire you for gigs. And it's like an old school union gig. Which can be really hard to find out in the real world unless you manage to like into it.
Yeah. So you were out in New Jersey playing some gigs and stuff, and then you made the move back to Seattle for various reasons, family reasons, right?
Well, kind of. So when I was living in New Jersey, and especially like after my last year there at William Paterson, and then a couple of years after I graduated, I was working a little bit. I mean, again, everybody has their own coming of age story. I thought I was cool because rent was cheap. I was working with Chico, whenever he needed a saxophone player. I think I was like his number one, number two call for the things that he did. I was in a band with Gabriel, this guitar player named Gabriel Marin, who's in the band Consider the Source. We recorded an album there. I had like a nice restaurant gig with like Colby Eisner and Reggie Quinterly, and so in the whole thing. And again, in hindsight, I'm still appreciating the lessons that I learned from them. What kind of got me to move back to Seattle was, there was some family stuff out here. Like my mom lives out here. she's getting old. My stepdad isn't doing well. My dad's out in the area, so it was to be back with family, but also just sometimes you get into like a nasty situation with roommates where the living situation doesn't work out, and yeah, I mean, the trip back was actually kind of fun looking at it, because when I moved back, I think I drove across the country in less than 48 hours with one of my good friends from high school. I mean, the pinnacle moment was we drove from, I think, Middletown, Connecticut, where my grandparents live, to Chicago in like about 14 hours. I wanted to hang out for about a day. My friend, God bless his soul, he's an idiot. He drank 3 large gulps of coffee between like Pennsylvania and Detroit. We stopped at a rest stop right outside of Chicago. He was looking at Google Maps, and in his caffeine altered state said, "J-Dog, dude, let's just drive across the country, man. Let's just do it. We can do it. We can beat 48 hours." So we got in the car, and he passed out at 8 a.m. in Michigan. We stopped at a rest stop, and I just said, I just accepted the challenge, and I think we made it back in like 47 and a half hours, maybe 47, 46, instead of the 48.
Wow, that's a big distance. I mean, like more than 2,000 something miles. So you came back to Seattle. So tell us a little bit about what happened when you came back to this to the Seattle scene. Who were some of the players you got connected with?
See here. I got my good friend Darian Asplin. He helped me out. He helped me out a good amount. See here. Before I moved back, like I switched over to being an alto player. But because that's what I was playing with in Less Magnetic, and my baritone, and I got robbed. Somebody broke into my house when I was arranging for a show, and my horn just got stolen. So, and I was always back and forth about buying another one. So I was kind of mainly an alto player. I think like for the first couple of months, I didn't even want to play music because things had fallen apart, and I wanted to just work a normal job and just kind of find something else. I guess when was this? Like 2011, 2012. There was a huge recession going on. I couldn't even get a job at McDonald's. I couldn't get a job bagging groceries because I don't know. There was this huge gap in my resume, or something. Like I think what really did it to me and what got me to just throw caution to the wind and just go full time into music in Seattle was applying for a job at Wells Fargo, being the only person whose name the interviewer remembered, and coming home and getting a rejection email like same day within 10 minutes. And that's when I said, screw it. I've already put in enough time practicing my instrument, writing tunes and stuff. I might as well just push it and go all in. Or as the saying when I was at William Paterson, like just practicing, you go hard. You gotta go hard. Yeah. So then I'd go and hang out at jam sessions. I'd pick up a couple of gigs. I ended up getting. I mean, I had to look at. I think I was picking up gigs off of Craigslist, which is what you do when you don't really know that many people. Started going out to jam sessions. I hooked up with my friend Darian Asplin. I think I was playing in the formation of this Motown group I work with, and they wanted me to switch over to tenor. And so my friend Darian Asplin gave me his first tenor. He'd call me to sub for gigs. There's this cat named Alex Dugdale, who I've known since middle school, who was working himself into the scene, getting into like the corporate and society gigs and stuff, and he'd call me to sub for him for like a bunch of big band stuff. Because when I was in high school to like when I moved back, there was this huge big band scene at some of the local clubs, which was nice, because it was kind of like your entryway into getting into the calls to play at the casinos and other stuff. And was watching the old interviews with guys like Jimmy Heath or anybody in the older generation. They'd say they came up playing in the big bands, which is where you learn how to read and play your instrument. And yeah, so and there was still a slice of that in Seattle. Then that which is what, and I was, for a hot minute, I was like the guy that people would call day of to come and fill in for a gig, and which was fine. But one thing that I've noticed out here is that it's really hard to get people to be respectful and just offer you some bread. It's like you get called. I think the whole reason I stopped was I got called by this saxophone player who does some pit work and runs some tribute bands, I guess. He called me like the day of. I think I had it was like 5 hours before I hit at Tula's, and which is an old jazz club. And I said, all right, I'll do it, but can I get some bread, man? This is like the third time this week you've called me to fill in for you last minute.
Bread as in money for gigs for people who don't.
Yeah. Money. Can you make sure I get like X amount, like the union minimum for doing this at the last minute? And it just turned into something that I probably shouldn't expose on the internet.
Yeah, well, I mean that's it's tough. Situations are tough, but I know you are working, playing different gigs around here, and you're working with some of the elder guys like Nathan Breedlove and Gary Hammon, and doing some of those gigs. But then you're also working with some other types of bands around here.
Oh, dude, on the West Coast, you have to be
Breaks
to be
and Swells, right?
Yeah. I'm pretty much I've written for them. I've written horn parts for them, and it's fun. They're starting to tour a little bit. They always get really great local shows. Much love for Breaks and Swells. Yeah, Nathan. I actually met Nathan Breedlove, who connected me with Gary Hammond through this trombone player named Mark Mason. Mark's like my uncle at this point. I just got done with a gig with him out in Coeur d'Alene. Mark's got his own. I'm on a couple of his albums too. Mark's like my uncle. He's like one of the only people in town I can go have coffee with. He'll actually ask me how I'm doing, and I'll give him the response saying, "Oh, I haven't worked in I haven't had a gig in 6 weeks, but I've been writing a good amount of music." And then he'll come and line me up with about 3 to 5 gigs. He's one of those and his harmonic sense and his tunes are just they're a blast. They're tricky. They're tricky and a blast to play. And yeah, no. So Mark knows everybody in Seattle. So Mark hooked me up with Nathan, and then Nathan hooked me up with Gary. And the way so Nathan was playing in my group, Jeremy's Pyramid Scheme, which was supposed to and we did a couple festivals. We had a nice string of gigs, and now a couple local festivals in Seattle. And then I've changed the formation into a bigger ensemble. The way I got and then Nathan hooked me up with Gary Hammond, and the way I met Gary Hammond was that Lorraine Gordon was in town for an Earshot thing, and Earshot's the local jazz magazine. Nathan invited me to come sit in on this gig, in which he was going to present music in tribute to local legend Hadley Calaman. Hadley grew up in L.A. Here's what I know about Hadley. I know he was from the Bay. A lot of people respected Hadley and regard Hadley as a local legend in Seattle. He is also told to be Dexter Gordon's favorite tenor player. In fact, Hadley Calaman's nickname was Little Dex. And so Lorraine Gordon had just published a book that was getting where she was giving a talk and reading excerpts about the book. She wanted music, and yeah, Gary was on the gig paying tribute to Hadley and Dexter Gordon because he knew those guys, and Yeah, and so I got to sit in on a couple of tunes towards the end of the set, and now Gary and I we talk pretty regularly. Nathan, I'm still working with, and I've been and just knowing those guys, it's been great because you get a piece of history that not many people will tell you about. Like one of the things that I'm doing now, and it's just a trip. It's about the tenor player named Joe Brazil. He's the guy on Coltrane's Ohm. He was in Detroit, and then he came out to Seattle, and he was a huge influence on the music scene. And he started up the jazz program at the University of Washington, and not many people really know. People know about him, and they know his influence, but not a lot of people know about him. And so I'm performing in his legacy band, which is a blast. It's kind of like a whole movement of stuff, and and again part of that connection was kind of like coming from Gary Hammond. I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, you're working a lot now and progressing your career, and perhaps in the future, we may see you one day back in New York. We talked about that. So, thanks for talking a little bit about what you've been doing, and we'll be making a future video doing like a tour of the clubs here in Seattle. So, Jeremy, thanks for talking, and where can people check out your music?
Man, I'm underground, man. I'm so underground that you can I'm so underground that you have to still find me on SoundCloud. All jokes aside, you can email me. I've got a couple things that I'm getting ready to get out. I've got a CD I recorded a couple years ago. Delayed Genius. It's about to get mastered. If you want to hear any previews, I can send you that. Let's see, or you can go to my SoundCloud /Jeremy Shaskus. There's a bunch of electronic compositions I made, some demos of my new formation of Jeremy's Pyramid Scheme, and then hopefully on this episode.
All right, thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Jonah.